Hello and welcome back to a new episode of my podcast, The True Crime Cocktail Hour, Historical True Crime Case Edition. This is where we come together after a tough week of work to enjoy a little after-work cocktail together and take a closer look at a true crime case. My name is Holly, so glad you could join me today. This is case 2 of the 4-part series, and for today's case we are going to Paris. And of course, we also need the right cocktail for this, So for today's case, I'll be making us a French Martini. If you want to know how to make this cocktail and all the things you're gonna need, just keep on watching this video. I'll add the ingredients and several steps to make this cocktail right here over the course of the video. So, short intro, I get everything ready, and then we get started with case number 2, historical true crime cases, The Crimes of La Petite Démone, Gabriele Bompard. This man right here is Michel Eyraud. Michel Eyraud likes to think of himself as an adventurer, a real go-getter, a real daredevil. In reality, he's a liar, a cheat, a good-for-nothing man. He was born on the 30th of March, 1843, as the son of simple merchants. He never learned a real profession his entire life. He made his money with gambling and theft. And even then, he was just moderately successful. Michel got married at the age of 27, and his wife at the time, she was 19 years old, and she quickly had to learn what it meant to be married to Michel Eyraud. He beats her, he humiliates her, he drinks far too much alcohol, and then one day, he suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. A couple of days later, he reappears in Paris. And this is where he wants to make a fresh start and finally rise to higher social circles. However, he must have taken the wrong turn somewhere along the way, because instead of the Parisian high society, he soon finds himself back in the Parisian underworld. And it is exactly there where he met 21-year-old Gabriele Bompard in the summer of 1889. Gabriele wasn't originally from Paris either. She was born in the north of France as the daughter of a metal worker. By the standards of this time, and I guess even today, Gabriele is a nightmare of a daughter. She is ill-mannered, she is loud, and she's selfish. A spoiled brat who has a very difficult time to abide by social rules. So her parents are kind of overwhelmed with her. They don't really know what to do with her. They can't just marry her off to some guy. No man in his right mind would take her as a wife. But at the same time, the social pressure on her parents to finally get their daughter in her place is growing day by day. And so, in 1989, her parents decided to commit her to a psychiatric institution where she is supposed to learn how to behave like a quote-unquote real woman. But boy, did they do the math without their daughter. Gabriele has absolutely no intention of being locked up in a cage. She doesn't want to be trained, or she doesn't want to be told what to do. So instead of following through with her parents' plan, she just packed the essentials and she fled to Paris, where she would soon fall into the hands of con man Michel Eyraud. Michel Eyraud and Gabriele Bompard have one thing in common right from the get-go. Both of them need money. And Gabriele is actually fascinated by Michel and his tall tales and his half-truths, but she's even more fascinated by his criminal energy. For the first couple of weeks, it was enough just to, quickly reach into someone's pocket or over the counter, and they had enough money to go for the day. But it was never enough, especially if you wanted to be a part of the Parisian high society. And then it was also very exhausting and laborious, and the risk of being caught was just far too great for the meager yield. You just need this one great plan that will get them so much money, it catapults them right into the Parisian high society. And so the two of them come up with a plan. And the plan is as follows. Gabrielle will seduce a rich and wealthy man and lure him back to her apartment in the 8th district. She will then try to make him sit on a sofa, where she will again try to seduce him, and then very seductively wrap a silk scarf around his neck. Right? So right behind the sofa, there is a big curtain behind which Michel will wait for the agreed sign. So Gabrielle, while wrapping the silk scarf around the victim's neck, will try to make a knot. Then she will give the agreed sign to Michel. And when she would do so, Michel would jump out from behind the curtain and attach a hook to the silk scarf on the neck of the victim and then pull the victim up by a long rope he had thrown over a beam and attached to this hook. The neck of the man would be broken and everything would look like a suicide by hanging. And then they would have enough time and the opportunity to literally take the money out of the victim's pockets. And even better, the right victim is soon to be found. 49-year-old bailiff Toussaint Augustin Gouffée. What did this poor man do to deserve this? Well, honey, he didn't do anything. He didn't deserve this. But you know, Toussaint Augustin, he was, I don't know, a womanizer. He was an apron hanger. He was one of those men who liked to go around town and tell everyone who wanted to know about how much money he made and how much money he had. And he constantly bragged about how much money he had in his pockets, right? And even better, Gabrielle and Toussaint Augustin actually know each other. He had previously tried to sweet talk Gabrielle to come back home with him. That was unsuccessful. But I mean, persuading him now to come back to her apartment is like child's play. They had prepared everything. There's the curtain, Michel is waiting behind it, there's the sofa right in front of it, and Gabrielle and Toussaint are on their way to her apartment. And the plan starts off as planned. Gabrielle has a very easy time to seduce this bailiff, and she gets him to sit on the sofa, and she's trying to wrap the silk scarf around his neck. But just when she had tied this knot and gave Michel the agreed sign, Michel jumped out from behind the curtain. But when he tried to attach the hook to the silk scarf, Toussaint Augustin reacted very quickly and he pushed back. So now Michel pounces onto him and the two men start to fight. And Michel is trying his best to get the upper hand, to throw Toussaint on the ground, but the bailiff fights back nail and tooth. Sadly though, Michel actually managed to get the upper hand. He threw Toussaint on the ground, he got on top of him, and he ended up strangling him to death with his bare hands. Short pause, just for breathing, get some air. And then Gabrielle and Michel realize that the man is in fact dead. The motive was pure greed. And I mean, the murder didn't work out as planned, but you know, the results are the same. And Gabrielle and Michel are quite satisfied with themselves. And even better, they now can grab into his pockets, get this money, and finally be rich. But get this. Bad surprise. Ce n'est pas très bien. Because guess what? The bailiff, Toussaint Augustin, didn't have one single dime on him. Nothing. No penny in his pockets. So instead of money, they now have a dead body they have to get rid of as fast as possible before he starts smelling up the joint. Gabrielle and Michel know they have to be fast now. So they take Toussaint's dead body, they wrap it up, sort of like a bundle, and then they take the rope they wanted to hang him with, and they wrap that around his body. Last but not least, they place the body in a wooden trunk they had purchased shortly before the murder. So the both of them, they have to hurry the fuck up to get this body somewhere else but Paris so he cannot be traced back to them. So on the 27th of July, 1889, Michel and Gabrielle bought train tickets. And the next thing you know is you see these two carrying the wooden trunk with the dead body through Paris to the Paris Gare de Lyon train station, where the train departs to Lyon. Gabriele and Michel just act like, you know, everything is fine, nothing happened, we're not murderers. They take a seat on the train, and they had left the wooden trunk in the luggage compartment. So upon arrival in Lyon, they rented a van, and with the wooden trunk in the back, they drove down to Vernesson, a town south of Lyon. They actually wanted to go a lot further, but at this point, the stench coming from the wooden trunk was just unbearable. So they stopped at a remote place and had the body just roll down a slope. They smashed the wooden trunk and left the wooden pieces under a tree. 2 days later, on the 29th of July, Toussaint Augustin Gouffée was reported missing in Paris by his relatives. So 2 weeks have passed when the street cleaner Dennis Coffey suddenly showed up at the Millery police station in Lyon, saying that there was this really foul-smelling stench coming from a side street in Vernesson. So the police officers, they go down to this place and take a look around, and they also notice this stench, and eventually they find a small wrapped up bundle. You probably guessed it. When they opened up this bundle, they found the decomposing body of a man. Exactly 1 day later, the forensic pathologist Dr. Alexandre Lacassange performed the autopsy. And, you know, he found everything out that we already know. You know, time of death, 3 to 5 weeks ago. Cause of death, strangulation. The only thing he couldn't find out for the life of him is who the victim was. But then 1 more day later, a farmer discovered the smashed wooden trunk under this tree, and he alerted police because he as well had heard of the body that was found in Lyon. So investigators went out to look at this wooden trunk, and they immediately noticed and recognized the smell that was kind of clinging to it. And it was the smell of death. But it gets better for them, because on one of the wooden pieces, they found a sticker from the PLM Railway Company stamped in Paris on the 27th of July. So in Paris, one immediately made the connection between the missing persons report and the body that was found in Lyon. So in order to definitively prove that the body is that of Toussaint Augustin, the forensic pathologist Lacassange resorts to hitherto unusual methods. He's actually one of the first to come up with this kind of forensic science, and he ends up comparing the victim's hair to that out of Gouffée's comb. That wasn't a standard at the time. And then also he had written in his autopsy report that the victim had a spinal deformity. Gouffée was treated by various doctors in Paris for, you guessed it, a spinal deformity. In the meantime, investigators in Paris had found out that the victim was last seen with 2 notorious fraudsters, namely Michel Eyraud and Gabriele Bompard. So when investigators followed up on this tip, they found out that these 2 had left Paris in a hurry on the 27th of July. What a coincidence. And to top it all off, a carpenter came forward to police and claimed that he had sold the wooden trunk they had found in Lyon to these 2 fraudsters right before the murder. So now, Gabriele Bompard and Michel Eyraud are wanted in whole France. An arrest warrant is issued, but the 2 fraudsters are long gone. They had long since moved to San Francisco. New city, new start, another chance to finally rise up to higher social circles. Funny enough, I don't know what they're doing, but they're not doing better, at least financially, than in Paris. They are, in fact, so desperate for money that they think about just repeating their botched coup from Paris, but this time in San Francisco. And they again found the perfect victim. Another wealthy businessman, a Frenchman as well. And Gabrielle and this man ended up spending a lot of time together. You know, she wanted to get to know him, gain his trust, so she would eventually have a good excuse to lure him back to her apartment. But when the day finally came and Michel asked Gabriele to finally follow through and get this man back to her apartment, Gabriele confessed to Michel that she can't murder this man anymore. So Michel asks, well, why can't you? And Gabriele says, well, I've spent a lot of time with this man and I got to know this man and I fell in love with him. So, Michel, he kind of had it at this point with Gabriele. And this is when Michel and Gabriele decided to go separate ways. So Gabriele is in a real pickle right now because this man wants to go back to France, where she is wanted for murder, a fact that he obviously has no clue about, and Gabriele doesn't want this man to know that she is a murderer, It's a red flag. Then on the other hand, she really wants to be with this man. So she has to make a decision. Will she go back to Paris with this man in hopes of not being recognized? Or does she stay in San Francisco and say goodbye to a great love? Now, Gabriele is, quite confident, and she probably thought, well, no way they're going to recognize me. So she decided to take the risk. And she traveled back to France with this man. But boy, was she wrong. She was recognized immediately and she was arrested before she could even leave the freaking train station. At first, Gabriele denied everything, all of the accusations. But the evidence was so freakishly overwhelming that eventually she confessed to the murder. However, she also claimed that she took part in the murder involuntarily because this guy Michel Eyraud had hypnotized her. Oh, and speaking of Michel Eyraud, he traveled via Canada and Mexico to Cuba, where he lived in a shelter for the needy, and it would probably be best for this man if he would just keep a low profile for a little while at least. But I guess Michel Eyraud just can't help himself. So one day, when he tried to sell a stolen coat at a bazaar in 1890, he was caught, arrested, deported back to France. In December 1890, Gabriele Bompard and Michel Eyraud were put on trial for murder. Michel Eyraud was found guilty and he was sentenced to death by guillotine. On the 3rd of February 1891, this sentence was carried out by the executioner Louis Deibler. So, yeah, you know what I mean? But back to Gabriele. Because the judges were reluctant to sentence Gabriele to death as well. Because over the course of the trial, she had become a minor celebrity. And a lot of people could just not believe that a good-looking young lady like her could ever murder a guy. It was unbelievable. This whole thing was just pure insanity. The press alone, you won't believe it. They were more interested in what she was gonna wear for her next court hearing and how she was gonna style her hair than the actual murder. No one gave a shit, apparently. Another bonus point for Gabriele was that hypnosis was a very big deal in Paris at the time. A lot of people thought it to be true, and so her lawyer took that to his advantage. Obviously said that she was in fact hypnotized by Michel Eyraud, and he pleaded not guilty for reasons of insanity for his client. Now, the judges didn't believe this whole story. She wasn't categorized as insane, but there were in fact mitigating circumstances invoked. So this crazy story about allegedly being hypnotized did in fact save her life. She was instead sentenced to 20 years hard labor, but she was already released after serving only 15 years in prison for good behavior. And even 15 years later, she was still this minor celebrity. She earned her living as a burlesque dancer from then on, and she was being super successful because obviously the people wanted to see the convicted murderess dance. Does she care that her success is based on the bailiff's death? Probably not. Every time she talked about the murder, she appeared so ice-cold and cruel and just simply unbothered. A circumstance that earned her the nickname, quote-unquote, La Petite. Démone. Gabriele Bompard died in the 1920s, alone and in secret. The revolutionary methods of forensic pathologist Dr. Alexandre Lacassagne, on the other hand, are immortal. The methods he used for the first time during his autopsies are now a standard in forensic modern science. And that, honey, was case 2 of the series Historical Crime Cases. Let me know down below what you think about this case. You can also hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, you can give this video a thumbs up so I know that you enjoy what I do here on my cute little channel. I'll see you again in 2 weeks for another cocktail and of course another mysterious historical true crime case, case 3. And for this one, we're going back to the United States of America, and we'll be talking about a man who had a very weird and illegal idea. I am already so looking forward to that. Until then, have a lovely weekend. Mwah! And I'll see you then.